us this afternoon at our 11th COVID-19 Resilience Talk, The Power of Mentorship. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I'm Debbie Magnesi. I'm the Assistant Dean of Development for the D'Amore-McKim School of Business. And we put together this speaker series back in late March when we all went remote as a way to make everyone feel a part of our community, to bring you an opportunity for lifelong learning, and to put us in a situation where we can discuss some of the most pressing topics brought to the surface through COVID-19 with some of our leading faculty experts, alumni, and friend experts. So this is, like I said, our 11th out of what will be 12 talks currently on the books. Before I introduce our moderator, I have a few housekeeping items I'd like to share. First of all, this talk will be recorded for future viewing. We are going to take the liberty of turning off everyone's videos and audio, and we ask that you do not turn your audio back on during the talk because it will make for a cleaner recording. I encourage you, once we get started, to click on the speaker view button in the top right hand of your screen. That way, instead of looking at a bunch of boxes with names in them, you will be able to see the speaker who's talking at the moment. And then finally, throughout the entire presentation, we highly encourage you to put any questions you have for the panelists or the moderator into the chat. Either send it to the whole group or you can send it directly to me. And once we get to the Q&A session at the end, we'll be sure that they address those questions. So without further ado, I'm so pleased now to introduce our moderator for today's talk, Susan Montgomery. You'll have to excuse me if it looks like I'm reading off of something, because Susan's background and experiences are so vast, I literally could not remember all of them in order to do this introduction properly. So please bear with me. As a member of the faculties of the D'Amore-McKim School of Business and the School of Law, Professor Montgomery has focused on interdisciplinary business and law programs, including development and operation of the IP CoLab and IP Innovation Connection Conference, and teaches legal environment for entrepreneurs and innovators, early stage IP decisions, IP transaction practices, and branding law and practice. Professor Montgomery also co-chairs the university's Mosaic Council and is a member of the Venture Mentoring Network Steering Committee. She serves as an advisor to the American Law Institute on Principles of Software Contract Law. She previously served on the Board of Trustees for the Rhode Island School of Design and the American Intellectual Property Law Educational Foundation, and the boards of directors of Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts and the International Trademark Association. She is also a current mentor with the Women's Entrepreneurship Initiative at Northeastern. Susan, there's nothing more left to say. Please take it away, and thank you so much for moderating today.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be here, and this program is not about me. I'm flattered that Debbie chose to say so much about me, but I think that I have been a mentee and I have been a mentor and involved in mentorship programs, and I am very enthusiastic about them, and I think this is a really important panel, so I was delighted to be asked, and then to be presented with the gift of three wonderful panelists. So we have a really good group of speakers for you today. We've taken a quick look at the audience, and I want to make sure that all of you know going into this that our panelists are all prepared and have experience to talk about the point of view of the mentee, the point of view of the mentor, and how this is a relationship and a shared journey. And also, all three of our panelists have been involved in setting up mentor programs. So we have a range of topics that they're ready to talk about, and I think we can answer the questions that either we will anticipate in the beginning, or that you'll put in the chat and we'll catch up with later on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to briefly introduce each speaker, and I decided to not tell you too much about them, but instead ask each of the speakers to briefly tell you something about themselves as a mentor or mentee, give you a sense of their point of view, maybe something from their experience, and we'll do that going through each of the three, and then we'll move on to more discussion. So without further ado, the first of our panelists that I want to introduce is Kay Crowley. Kay is currently a mentor at the Mother Caroline Academy, and she is also the founder of the Academy's mentoring program. And as a parent of a fairly recent grad, Gay is also a mentor in the university's Torch program. So Gay, tell us something about yourself and how you feel about this mentoring topic we have today.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for hosting me. Hope you can hear me okay. Yes, I am the proud parent of an graduate from Northeastern and a master's student who just finished up in December. And I am the founder of the Mother Caroline Academy and Education Center mentoring program, which is, Mother Caroline is a nonprofit school for the education of underserved young women from Boston and surrounding areas. So really our program was founded on the premise of offering support to these young women as they prepared for a variety of independent high school scenarios to which they would be moving on, ultimately with the goal to support them right until their post-secondary experience, whether that be college or a job or some kind of further training. In the process of running the Mother Caroline program, I learned a bit about the Torch Scholarship Program and reached out to Torch in my capacity at Mother Caroline and invited them to participate in what we called our Girl Power event, which was an annual event to address issues of female empowerment, and to which we invited our entire Mother Caroline community. And we really loved the idea of partnering with Torch because it gave our girls a glimpse into that next chapter. So that was my introduction to Torch as well. So I'm currently a mentor within the Torch program. I work with a really wonderful young woman, Jessica Torres. She is from Mexican descent. And my original mentee, before I even started the Mother Caroline program, and I are still exceptionally close, and that's Dulcie Pina, who's Cape Verdean. And I just am so thrilled that through mentoring, I, my family, and so many others have had this experience to have this really great, multicultural immersion. And I think for me, that's been a huge benefit of mentoring. It's because it doesn't just mentor the mentee, benefit the mentee, it benefits the mentor, and so many people in our lives where there's a trickle-down effect. I guess I would say that, this is a really important time in mentoring. So many of the young women, in particular, I have worked with young women over the course of the year. So I would argue that this applies to youth in general or anybody who's being mentored, but we are in a time of crisis right now, and resilience is what we're really here to talk about. And I think this position of being a mentor really has offered a great opportunity, both for myself and for the mentees, to reach out and have some support. And by example, I'll give you two examples and then I'll be quiet and see if we can't get some other opinions here. But in my experience, Dulcie and Hannah, my daughter, who is now almost 24, have grown this incredible relationship over the years. And as we entered the COVID crisis and then had to face the death of George Floyd and all the resultant protesting, my daughter looked at me and said, "Oh my gosh, I'm a racist, and I didn't even know it. I love all these people in my life. I love Dulcie. Dulcie's my sister, but I've got all these behaviors I didn't even know about. And the great news was that she could turn to Dulcie and Dulcie could become the mentor after all these years. Now, to give context, I don't think I said, we met Dulcie when she was 14 years old. She's now 33. So this relationship has had longevity and lots of context over the years. So this has been offered resiliency for Dulcie to see that people out there are tapped into what she might be struggling with at present. And it has given my daughter an opportunity to be supported in a crisis as well. And as for my torch mentee, she had to get off that Northeastern campus really quickly, and she had to figure it all out. Am I going to be able to fly home? Will there be flights? Should I be scared on my flight? Where's my stuff going to go? Can I afford the flight? What's happening? And she had a mentor to turn to, someone who could support her through that process. And we worked together to get her safely home, get her stuff stored away. And we've had a lot of great conversations over everything that's going on in the world, the challenges of being a student while being a little stressed out by what's going on in the world, converting to technology, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll leave it at that and let somebody else chime in, but hopefully that's a starting point.
Thank you very much, Gay. That's really helpful and good of you to emphasize that there's a lot of things going on right now that for particular people or all of us may be part of the challenge, part of the uncertainty, part of the peril that a mentor-mentee relationship can help you navigate and can provide some resilience. So we have heard a little bit about mentorship from you in starting at least in an educational environment, an academic environment. I'm going to turn now to Jeanine Mendez, who is our second speaker. Jeanine is a 2008 graduate of D'Amore-McKim School of Business. She is the co-founder of Kindwork, which helps talented youth from overlooked communities with tech-focused career development. So into the employment context, and like all our panelists, she has experience both as a mentee and a mentor. So Jeanine, give us a sense of your point of view and something from your experience.
Absolutely. Thanks, Susan. So I wanted to share a little bit about, I know we maybe have some folks on the call who potentially are interested in building a mentor program, and mentorship is a huge part of Kindwork. We've actually built into the program a full year of mentorship where our students who are entering tech for the first time, who maybe don't have the same types of connections some of us might have coming out of somewhere like Northeastern, an opportunity to have a career coach and a mentor with them through that whole first year as they transition into their new career. And so my experience with that part of our program has really been phenomenal. I think as Gay was speaking and talking about resilience, one of the greatest things you can do as a mentor is sort of share the times you've come across that have been difficult, like maybe transitioning to remote work, having to switch gears really quickly, maybe getting critical feedback in your role, and how can we as mentors sort of share those experiences we've had where we've been able to be resilient because we have a strong network, because we have a strong background, and be that support network for your mentee. And so as part of our program, I've had a student who ended up losing his job. His contract ended, and it had been his first job in tech. And so we spent about a month and a half together figuring out how do we transition his experience so he can jump into another role. And with our support, he went from unemployed, he came to us unemployed, went through our program, got a job that was about 3 or 4 months long, and then he was able to jump to a salaried role where he was making about $53,000 a year working for a tech performance marketing company. So that is a massive jump, both in income, in career, for someone just within a year. And I really think that's, a big part of that is the power of mentorship and really listening to someone and helping them transition into a new career field. In terms of myself, having been a mentee and been in sort of in companies with mentorship programs, one thing I wanted to call out for everyone is just reminding sort of that there's a difference between sponsorship, if you're in a company, like finding a sponsor, somebody who's going to help you with your career in that company, someone who has power to help you get promoted or to sort of be behind closed doors and speak really highly of you. And I was lucky enough in my time in tech to have a sponsor. In my time at Uber, I had a really great sponsor there, and I was able to have a career really flourish in the company. And it was a sort of stark difference when my sponsor ended up leaving the company. I didn't have folks vouching for me behind closed doors. It was really hard to continue to like move up and move around the company. And so I think for folks who are thinking about starting mentorship programs in companies, if your company's thinking about starting one, I would say think about how you can sort of create more of a sponsorship program, because those things can really make a huge difference for folks within companies who need help, both climbing the ladder, figuring out sort of the politics. A sponsor can really help do that. And then for creating mentorship programs, I think anyone can be a mentor. You don't have to like work with someone directly in a company. Gay and I are mentoring folks who are, in all different walks of life, all different ages. And so it's really just about being there and listening and helping folks through difficult times or figuring out how to transition. So that's, I think for me, just being in the tech world and in the finance world, I always love letting people know sponsorship and mentorship can be two different things. Both are equally really, really important as we're thinking about how to help folks in their career or just, help them through a difficult time like we're all going through now. Great. And then back to you, Susan.
Thank you very much, Jeanine. And that's an interesting point, and one that we can come back to if people have more questions about the difference between mentorship and a sponsor or sponsorship or a championship within an employment situation. So our third panelist is, I know because I looked at the attendee list, is well known to a number of people who are participating. And that's Jeff McCarthy. Jeff McCarthy is an alum of D'Amore-McKim School of Business. He is also a co-founder of the McCarthy's Venture Mentoring Network on campus, otherwise known as VMN. So I'm going to invite him to say something about that, but I don't think he needed the invitation. Jeff is also a partner at Northbridge Venture Partners. And before that, he had a number of positions in sales and operations and leadership within companies, including CEO of Oak Communications and leadership positions at Acadia and Wellfleet. And he's somewhere in all of those things. He has certainly been a mentor to many and a mentee and involved in establishing this really important VMN network on campus. So Jeff, we're glad to have you here.
Well, thank you, Susan, and hi, everybody. It's another beautiful day here in New England. I hope that's where you are, and if you're not, you're missing out on a great day. Susan, thanks for the kind opening remarks. I'll tell you, I guess at the high level, I had an operating position for about 20 years, different companies and such. I was lucky enough to work for some really good companies and participate with them. And then for the last 22 years, I've been a partner at a venture capital firm. And so my spin on mentoring, although not limited to this, but my spin on it is more around business and company starting and company formation and that kind of thing. I've done it essentially my entire career. And so it's the way I look at it. But as you just heard from Gay and Jeanine, mentoring is not a single-threaded operation. If you are somebody's mentor, they look to you for advice on all sorts of things. So for example, if I was somebody's mentor, while obviously they would lean on me maybe for business advice and counsel, et cetera, but they're going to ask me whatever is on their mind, and expect me to give some kind of personal advice. So mentoring is sort of a 360 kind of a thing. So I'd also say I am a D'Amore-McKim grad quite a number of years ago. I would also tell you I'm a very proud Northeastern alum. I'm so proud that I went to that school, and what it's done for me has been just tremendous. So I'm delighted to be a Northeastern alum. I would say, I think about 15 years ago, I started to get back re-engaged with Northeastern. And I wound up doing some guest speaking in some of the MBA courses that were offered. And I spent quite a bit of time in Dan McCarthy's MBA program about strategy and about high-tech entrepreneurship and that sort of thing. And he would ask me every year if I would come and speak to his class, and I would gladly do that. And over those years, Dan and I got to be fairly close. And so close, in fact, that we shared a lot of common interests and common desire to make the Northeastern entrepreneurship experience and ecosystem fundamentally stronger than it was at that time 15 years ago. And so in 2014, Dan and I decided to co-found what has now become the VMN, the Venture Mentoring Network. And so that started in 2014. And today there's been approximately 400 mentors that have gone through VMN. We have 150 ventures. We have 6 different mentoring stages, things like build mentors, those that help give advice about, you know, the blocking and tackling of starting a company. First in mentors, those are the ones who try to map product to open markets and see if they can make those come together in a way that you can have some success. Deep tech mentors, people who are very, very tech mentors. So those are people who help their ventures acquire capital so that they can fund their companies. And as Susan said, we have a steering committee. The steering committee is made up of representatives from every college in the university. And I think there's like 14 or 15 colleges in the university or something like that. And we have a steering committee member from every single one of the colleges. So it is a broad university-wide program that we've started. And if I was to write the perfect Hollywood ending to the story, I would tell you here that Dan McCarthy was my mentor, and that would bring it back together. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. We became very close, and we remain extremely close. But he wasn't my mentor. I did have another mentor in my career, but it wasn't Dan. But what I would tell you is, if I could have chosen my mentor, I would have chosen Dan McCarthy. For those who don't know him, Dan is an absolute treasure for Northeastern. One of the best people you'll ever meet. He bleeds Northeastern, and just a terrific individual. And like I said, he and I co-founded the Venture Mentoring Network. We just had our 5th birthday party just a little while ago. So I'm gonna leave it there. It's pretty clear that my tact on mentoring is more about business advice. But like I said when I started, a good mentor is more than, you know, single-threaded. And so for all the people that I talk with, I'm going to talk to them about all kinds of things: their career, family issues sometimes that come up, mostly probably more business things that pop up. And so, but you spend time with these people in all those facets. And then the last thing I'd say is, with regard to, again, my spin being business, with regard to that, in this day and age, with COVID, you know, having workers all work from home, companies lay people off at an alarming rate. You know, this business is right now in a very resiliency issue time, where they don't know if customers are going to buy their products. They don't know if the employees are going to stay with them. They don't know if the economy is going to go down. They don't know if the employees don't know if they're going to have a job, and on and on and on. and you've got to be resilient. And so the time for this panel, I think, is absolutely perfect. It's just, there's so much going on right now. It's a very, very complicated time right now. So I'll go back to you, Susan, and let you continue on.
All right, well, thank you very much, Jeff. And I want to remind the audience that you have the chat. I haven't seen questions, but that may be because you're sending them directly to Debbie and not to everyone. So at some point, Debbie will let me know if she's got an accumulation of questions in the chat that I haven't seen, but she has, and we can get her to read them to us. And in the meantime, I'm going to ask some follow-up questions to our panel. I think I'll go back in reverse order now. So Jeff, I'm coming back to you first, I think. You know, you mentioned that, you know, you've been for many years, 22 years, I think you said, that you've been a partner with, you've been a venture capitalist. So you have lots of contact with people starting companies, growing companies, and you have that role. And yet you and Dan thought it was really important to start a mentoring network for early stage companies on the campus. Of course, we have a very vital and productive entrepreneurship community on campus. There's lots of businesses starting here. But can you say something to us about what is particular about a mentor who's mentoring someone who's starting a business? What is that relationship, and how is it different from the other people around a founder who are trying to give them advice and support them?
Well, you're right. There's some similarities and there's some differences. And back when we decided to do what we did, forming the VMN, it was the entrepreneurial ecosystem was existed. So I do a lot of small companies, and by these at Northeastern, they started by essentially three frequencies. Number one is, of course, students. That's probably surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, the least number. The second is faculty. Faculty starts companies. And then the third is the alums. And the alums actually make up the largest number of companies that come in through the Northeastern ecosystem. And it was clear to me and clear to Dan that a company that was having some sort of success, that really did have a good idea, that knew that a certain product that they were going to come up with would match to a certain market opportunity. Those companies, in order to make the next step, and whether it's acquiring capital or acquiring customers or hiring the best people or whatever the next step in the business progression, a mentor would be so helpful to those companies, where they might be able to open the door of a potential customer and introduce the founder to a potential customer, so that the founder could talk to the company and say that this is what we're thinking of doing. Is that something that you could possibly buy? Or open their Rolodex to potentially employees to join the startup, et cetera, et cetera. And I knew that would make a huge difference to a small company, where sometimes the founders may be technically gifted, but they don't have the breadth of experience yet, or have the contact base that a mentor might give them. So we have, in our VMN, we have mentors who come out of the biotech, just regular technology, they come out of military development, they come out of software development, and on and on and on. And those people have so much to offer to these small companies. And of course, they would like to give back as well. And so it's just a perfect match. The need of the fledgling venture and the founder matches perfectly with what our mentors have and their desire to add value to the company. So it's a nice little match.
And they both get something out of the relationship, don't they?
No question, no question. In fact, I would tell you, in my opinion, you get, as a mentor, you get as much and many, many times more than the value add you're bringing to the mentee. You'd be shocked at how good you feel.
Well, I'm not surprised to hear you say that at all, Jeff. Jeanine, I want to turn to you and a different group, right? So you're really focused on people who are trying to get a foothold, maybe get in or navigate the early stages of a career in a tech company. And Jeff talked about how these are trying times for startups and businesses, but in different ways, equally uncertain and scary for those who are trying to get involved. So I wanted to ask you if you had some thoughts to share on how your experience and your network can help with help you with resiliency with the people that are coming to you or that you're coaching or mentoring in your company.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually love how Jeff talked about it in terms of business, where you're sort of matching people with a skill set, or a mentor is able to open their network up and like bring in different, folks with experience to a founder. And I think of it very similarly, probably because I come from a tech background, for my mentees who are trying to get a foothold in the space. And so it's very similar. I think for me, being able to open my network up to the young adults that I serve, once they have exposure within tech, for them to say, hey, I'm interested in being a product manager, to then be able to reach out to my network and say, hey, who knows a really great product manager that would be willing to have an informational interview with a student of mine. And so then that person opens their network up, potentially to that student as well, like other folks they can meet, and you sort of create this sort of chain effect. And I've been seeing that happen quite a bit with COVID, where I think previously a lot of those sort of conversations happened behind closed doors, where it was just if you happen to have a mentor, if you happen to have someone in your network. And a really interesting trend I've seen is on LinkedIn, folks are now sort of openly requesting support. And I think that's really fantastic because it gives everyone an opportunity to jump in and help build somebody's network. Folks who have recently been laid off, as Jeff said, like there's been tons of layoffs. I think we're seeing, at least what I've seen in New York City in the tech space, companies are starting to open hiring back up, which has been really great. But folks just putting out an open call and saying, hey, I was recently laid off. Here's my skill set. Can someone put me in touch with any jobs that they know of? There's also been a really big distribution list created with folks who have been laid off at companies. So like Uber and Airbnb had these really great former employees who you should hire type of lists open to the public. And I think all of that just continues to build this really big tech network. And so when folks are thinking about building that mentor-mentee relationship, I always say, find that one person in your network who can sort of unlock the door to other people in your network. And sometimes it's cold LinkedIning, sometimes it's posting on LinkedIn. For our students, it's really the two coaches are me and my co-founder for those young adults, and we open up our wide network in tech to them. So I think it's really just a matter of finding one person to sort of unlock the door for you in a way, and to get a foothold in the sector. And tech in particular can be quite insular, but once you're in and once you have that one tech name on your resume, it's much easier to sort of speak to other folks, and you got the lingo down and you can have those conversations. So I'm a big fan of everything that's going on right now in LinkedIn. I think a positive thing coming out of COVID is that everyone is sort of seeing how informational interviews work. Everybody's seeing the power of networking with platforms like LinkedIn. And I think we just continue to encourage that even once COVID is over as well.
Thank you very much. I have before I turn to Gay, and while we're waiting for some more questions to be typed into the chat, I have a follow-up question for you, Jeanine. You make a really interesting point, something I wasn't personally aware of, about new uses and extensive uses of LinkedIn. And so I wanted to ask you a little further. Do you also see, I mean, here we are, we're talking, we can see each other. Do you see people using things like Zoom and other technologies more for their mentoring relationships? Is that a good thing? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think Zoom actually makes it a lot easier. In the past, I think informational interviews, folks prefer to do those in person or in an office. And I actually think the fact that we're all at home, and folks really want to reach out and they want to help and they know it's a really difficult time. I have found it's easier to sort of make connections with people, and they're more willing to take 15, 20 minutes out of their day because you're kind of just at home. So I do think this has made it a lot easier for folks, and it also has enabled us to get rid of like geographical barriers. People aren't thinking about like, am I in San Francisco? Am I in Amsterdam? Like, it doesn't matter. You can connect with anyone. And you can even, you know, find jobs remote. Like a lot of companies are becoming fully remote, and that's going to open up opportunities to folks in all across the country who, like, you may want to work at Twitter, but you can't move to San Francisco. Now, wherever you work, you can work at Twitter because they're going remote first. And so I think it's really, really going to change the way we think about making connections. That being said, I think it probably takes a little bit more work to make that connection over video if you're used to meeting someone in person and building that rapport. I know my extroverts out there are probably struggling a lot right now. And it's also a great opportunity, I think, for introverts who really thrive in sort of the more remote environment. But yeah, I think it's going to really help folks expand their networks for sure.
Well, that's interesting, because in the past, I certainly am aware in several mentoring networks, and others in our audience know that the geographically remote was something that seemed to be a limitation on expanding a mentor. And now you're saying, no, it's the other way around now, right? So that's an interesting development.
Exactly.
Gay, so here's my question for you. And I know you had time to think about this, because after starting off as a mentor, you then created the mentor program for the Academy. So you probably have a longer list than this. But I thought maybe I'd ask you if you're talking about someone being a mentor, selecting a mentor or training them to be a mentor, do you have a short list of do's or a short list of don'ts for mentors?
Short list. Well, I know I always took time. Anybody who is interested in becoming a mentor, they fill out an application, and then we meet for an informational interview, which usually lasted 2 hours. So fairly significant, that initial interview. And something I really learned over time is that often a very busy person is the best mentor, not somebody with a lot of time on their hands, which surprised me. And I think it's been interesting when I have those informational interviews to look a little into that with people. Some are very hesitant because they feel they already have a very full schedule and they're afraid they won't be able to make the commitment. And it's just interesting that oftentimes the opposite proves to be true. I have found they're very good time managers. People with very full calendars are very good time management people. And that's a skill set that also is beneficial when being a mentor. You know, that's role modeling something very important for their mentees. So that would be something I definitely, consider and advise. Very important to establish, a power balance in a mentoring relationship, really developing a relationship so you get to know the person you are mentoring well as a person before somebody that you are trying to, help, foster, advance, support, and hopefully also allows that mentee to get to know more about you as a person and sort of what motivates you from within. So I think that's a very important thing. And it's very important when you commit to mentoring. And I have always said to the mentors, hey, I have no problem with you saying, you know what, after hearing about all of this, I don't think I really can make the commitment to mentoring. I say, you know what, that's fine. I'd rather have you think about it up front. It's far more effective when a mentoring relationship has duration than to have a short-term ineffective relationship experience. So all the research shows this. So I really stress the importance of that when selecting mentors. It's a very important factor. And with the mentees, I've always said, you show up for me and I will show up for you 1000%. as your program director. I will really, I will go to bat for you if you go to bat for me. You know, you just need to show up and show me that you are interested in building a relationship, and we'll go from there. And I will speak to this whole Zoom thing. I am finding, like everybody else, wow, who knew we could accomplish so much over Zoom? And I mean, I think in building a program, this can be nothing but hugely beneficial, because there are one-on-one mentoring relationships, and there are group mentoring relationships, and there are individual dynamics and group dynamics. And like I said, you know, my mentee from Northeastern is now out back home in California, but we can see each other's face if we choose to do so. You know, there was FaceTime, but I just think it gives us this opportunity to grow that, you know, many of our conversations. Yeah, so I think those are pretty critical factors, you know, in being an effective mentor and what you're looking for as somebody building a program. And somebody who's eager to share their network. Like there was so much discussion about that. You know, so much of what I have done, everything I have done really has been with first generation college students, you know, so I'm evolving a student from a middle school age to post-secondary. And then many of those young women I continue to work with. So now I'm working with Torch, and I'm going to be working with them as they enter the job environment. And, you know, all of in that whole evolution, planting the seed in 6th grade of knowing you can build a network, and that there is a support system for you that you can utilize, and you will have to utilize. I've heard a lot of these kids come out so proud, they've got their degree, you know, now I'm going to get that big job. And it doesn't happen that way. So mentors are really critical in that evolution, and you know, supporting them through that process, resource brokering, network building, and you know, talking them through what their expectations are, and do they match reality, and helping them you know, map out a process that hopefully will ultimately get them employed.
That's really helpful. I'm beginning to see some of the questions that are going to everyone, so I can see that we could pursue any of the points we've already hit, but I'm going to pause. I understand that Debbie has a lot of questions that I haven't seen. So Debbie, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you have in the chat?
Absolutely. We are getting so many good questions. Thank you everyone for sending them in. They range from the tactical to the big picture. Maybe I can throw out a few aspects of the questions that I'm seeing, and the panelists can respond to what is relevant to them. So on the more technical side, how often does each mentor and mentee pair meet? How long is a mentor-mentee program intended to last for, or is it open-ended? And then what are some of the potential barriers to a successful mentor-mentee relationship?
Well, that's a lot right there. Does anybody want to take those first two very specific tactical questions? And I would add to that one that's in the general chat as a tactical question: how do you match mentors and mentees?
So I'll jump in. How long do they last, and how do we match, and some of that stuff? Again, I'm going to talk about it from our Venture Mentoring Network, the VMN program. We have mentor-mentee relationships that started right when we started 5 years ago that are still ongoing. And we have some that last a year, because as I mentioned, we have these various stages that you would be a mentor for. So you might be a mentor for that first in, I called it, and that's somebody who's very good at mapping product ideas to market evolution and that sort of thing. And that may be a year, and then now the founder's off building that product, and the mentor's job is a little lesser at that point, so it might dissipate it. They may come back. I mean, there's no real rules about that. They may come back. And then how do we do the matching? At least in the Venture Mentoring Network, we do play a role in the matching, because there are certain skills and disciplines that are really important whether it's domain, engineering, or business development, or finance, or these other domains. It could be by that, or it could be by market, biotech, software kinds of company, manufacturing companies, consumer companies, that sort of thing. And so you take that three-sided thing and try to put a fourth side in, and you pull all that together. And so we do a lot of that matching. But let's face it, just because we think on paper a perfect match has occurred, don't forget that founder or mentee and the mentor, they have to hit it off. They have to have a relationship that's going to work, or you're just kidding yourself. And so they have to get to know each other and make sure that they're copacetic. They just can work together. And then you have all this other benefit of the right domain, the right stage, the right discipline, et cetera, all that stuff.
And I can jump in here as well I saw that Lori in the chat wrote a question very similar and was asking about like creating a mentorship program within a company. And there's another question about pairing. I just think with pairing, it's like, like Jeff is saying, like you might have two people who on paper look great, but they won't be great together in person. But I do think for folks who are thinking about starting something from scratch, like the first question is like, what's the goal? So if it's within your company and you're saying, I think a mentorship program will help expand someone's network within the company they may not otherwise have access to. You really have to ask yourself a lot of questions to figure out like, what is the goal? So when I was at Uber, for example, I really wanted to connect some of our operations associates with engineers because there was a disconnect in them understanding what was happening, what was happening on the sort of operation side of the business. And so that was a mentorship program with a very specific goal. It had a very specific timeline. It was, meant to be 3 meetings where we would be doing sort of like a job shadowing situation for them to be able to connect on something really specific, which is what are the issues we're not seeing. So I think it just depends on your company or your program, how time-bound and structured you want it to be. In my case, that was a really structured program. But then with something like Kindwork, where our students were with them for a much longer period of time, it's a little less structured, and the job of the mentor is really to connect that person with other folks they can speak to. Those folks they're going to connect with aren't necessarily going to become their mentors, but it helps for them to get more exposure to different roles and people within the tech world. So I think step one is, what is the goal? The mentorship program should have it's okay, I think, to have a really specific goal and for it to be time bound, but it's hard if you go into it just saying, I want a mentorship program because I think I've heard this is helpful. What do you really want to get out of that? And I think if you're in a company, you may want to consider calling it a sponsorship program instead, where you get like more executive level folks to help sort of more entry level or mid-level folks get more traction within a company. I think that could be really, really impactful depending on the size of your firm and that kind of thing. So always start with the goal, and then I think some of the other stuff falls into place.
Yeah.
And it's interesting from my perspective because so much of what Jeff and Jeanine have said completely apply to my program experience, even though it's dealing with a different age and perhaps sometimes a different end goal. But we do have a goal, and we do look at time constructs. And our program at Mother Caroline had 3 very distinct stages, with the ultimate goal of, if it's working, it has the longevity through all 3 stages, but an initial commitment of the first year. But much to what Jeff said, it doesn't always work, despite we do a lot of hard work in matching, looking at goals, looking at personalities, looking at time commitments and availability. And we think we've done a great job, and it doesn't always work. And what I have found is critical is that gets addressed so that nobody feels like a failure. The mentor doesn't feel like a failure, and the mentee doesn't feel like a failure. We come together, we have a conversation, and it allows everybody to say, hey, it doesn't always work. Not every relationship becomes a best friend, basically. So we reevaluate, we reassign. You've got to remain open and fluid and be ready to pivot where that pivot can really, grow everybody's experience.
That's, we've been focusing in a lot of the answering some of these questions on programs, building a program, how a program works. I can tell from the questions that we do have some people who are coming in this and saying, well, how do I do it for myself? You know, I don't want to build a program, but how do I set up a mentoring program for me? How do I get a mentor? I think might be a different way. It's not the way it was stated in the question. So I think maybe we should speak to that as well.
Definitely, and I can jump in first here because I mentor a lot of people on finding mentors, I guess. A big part of it is just the first step is make sure you just ask. I think people love being asked. They love sharing their expertise. They love answering questions. And it's definitely always best, I think, if it's someone maybe it's someone you know from your company, maybe it's someone you were introduced to. Some of my mentors have come from doing informational interviews with people. Informational interviews, for those that don't know, which is when you reach out to somebody because you really want to learn about their background, you really want to learn about how they got to where they are maybe in their career, or you know, maybe they're very technical and you have technical questions for them. And sort of starting with informational interviews, I think, can build a relationship of curiosity where somebody else gets to share their experience, you get to ask questions. And that sort of can become an ask of, hey, can we do this again? Can I follow up with you? But I think there has to be that curiosity from the side of the mentee of wanting to learn, wanting to absorb information. What I think is sort of not the right way to approach a relationship is still like cold messaging somebody on LinkedIn and saying, will you be my mentor? Right. It's really difficult. They may not know you, they don't know, but messaging someone and saying, I would love to chat with you about your experience in venture. I would love to chat with you about your experience in startups. This is my story. I'm just starting out. I really just want to have a bunch of questions for you. Do you have 20 minutes to hop on a Zoom? Like that type of an ask, especially if you're looking for a mentor, it will help you to not just build that connection with that person, but understand, are they the right mentor for you? They may not have the right connections. They might not be in the right space. They might be able to point you in the direction of somebody who's looking for a mentee. So I think it's going to be a process, but you got to start with reaching out and having those informational interviews. So that's sort of how I usually tell folks to go about finding a mentor that will fit what they're looking for.
Jeanine, I noticed that one of the things you didn't say just now was you didn't say, look for someone just like you.
Correct. Yeah. You want folks with a different background and experience, I think. And especially if you are looking for mentees, try and find folks with different backgrounds. Like, you know, it's sort of like a way to share the love, right? Share your network with folks who might not otherwise have that opportunity. That's a really big part of what we do at Kindwork is helping New Yorkers, young adults who never thought they could have a career in tech, connect with the tech sector, get a foothold in the sector, and then support them with those connections. And I think a big part of a mentor-mentee relationship and what maybe you're looking for as a mentee should be exposure to connections and experiences you would otherwise not have had exposure to. And that could be because you have a different background. It could be because you grew up in a different part of the country, just like so many different factors. But yeah, I think the more different somebody is, the more you can learn from them, both as a mentor or mentee.
Yeah. Well, I think you could say the same thing to mentors who are looking for mentees. Debbie, do you have other questions that you want to share with us that we can't see on our screen?
You know what, you largely covered them. And we have about 5 minutes left. One more question though that came through, which is on the bit more personal side, but might be a nice way to end this, is would you be willing to share a personal story from your experience that illustrates the importance of the mentor relationship?
Well, that's sort of where we started, so we can do that, and I'll put a gloss on that before we let all three answer, which is, you know, some things don't go smoothly. Things don't always go smoothly. Sometimes the biggest learning moments are when something doesn't. So if you're willing to share something that was a learning moment for you, even though it isn't a shining moment of success, that might be helpful too. So who wants to go first in answering this combination question from Debbie and me?
I'm going to jump in, and I may not answer the question precisely, but I wanted to talk about one thing, and it sort of is in that answering the question, just a little bit. You know, one of the things that mentors and mentees have is, you know, they only want for each other's success. There's no other agenda, and that's the beauty of it. And I draw a comparison. I was, you know, thinking about it while Gay was speaking, and thinking, here she's giving all of this advice, great counsel, great mentorship to these young women, and she's not the mom. And so she has a different relationship, but she has to walk a fine line because the mom is there, well, or the family is there in some regard, and you can't overstep your bound. But the person you're mentoring or the mentee, they know in their heart that when you tell them something, even if it's tough love, that you're telling them because, you know, you want them to be the best they can be. And I think that's the case. And maybe it's not so as noble in business in kind of my world as what Gay does there. But, you know, if you are somebody who is somebody's mentor and you're on their board, for example, of a company, and you're not the money, because a lot of times companies raise money from individuals and the money usually sits on the board. And the money has sometimes these different agendas. And so you have this special relationship, but you can't go outside the boundary too far or you have ruined it for the mentee, and kind of everybody loses at that point. And so it's a tricky thing, but it's a wonderful thing. And so that's the message I wanted to get out, which wasn't really the answer to your question, but I wanted.
Well, I could jump in real quickly here, I think, and I have a wealth of stories I could tell you. There was plenty of learning curve in my experiences, and I did get approval before going on this from the young women I'm going to talk about. But Dulce, who I was the first young woman I mentored before I even started the program, and I had an experience where she had kept something from her mother and told her, you know, one story, and basically had said she was with me at that time, and she felt so guilty about it that when her mother and I and she were in the car about to drive down to Delaware to look at University of Delaware, and we pulled into Dunkin' Donuts, Dulce came in with me and proceeded to start crying hysterically. And I said, what is wrong? And she said, well, I've been dishonest and I feel terrible about it. And I had that fine line of, you know, do I speak with her mother? Do I honor her for being honest with me? So yes, you run into these things. And part of that also was realizing how important fostering that relationship, you know, at least in my circumstance where I'm dealing with a younger population, really building a relationship with the family, with the parents, and yeah, honoring that I am not the mother. I have so much gratitude and respect for that, the parents of the youth that I'm mentoring or that I'm sending off with a mentor, and I realize that boundary, and those boundaries are very important. But so bringing those other people in and getting to know them as well and showing them the same respect is very important.
I know we're running over a little, but Jeanine, I do want to give you a chance to speak too.
Yeah, I'll just quickly share. I think for everyone on the call that's thinking about being a mentor or mentee, you know, as a mentor, having mentored many people, I think one of the hardest things is when your mentee or maybe even your mentor doesn't sort of return or give you the same level of enthusiasm or support as you sort of wish there was. And there's been one or two young adults I've mentored who have just sort of dropped out of the relationship. And the first time that happens to you, it can be really hard. And you think, oh my God, I've messed up. What can I do? I sometimes joke with my partner that I'm like, I'm constantly texting them. I just send like paragraph text, like, where are you? Are you okay? When can we connect? Are you free? And I think that one big thing I'd like to leave folks with is if that can feel like failure, but really you're not going to connect with everyone. Especially like in my case, like people have a lot going on in their lives, especially with what's happening with COVID. Some folks everyone in their families lost their job, or their family are essential workers and they're having to stay home and take care of their siblings because they can't go to school. And so all of these things can build up, and it's not always about you as the mentor or mentee. Like sometimes there's just more going on in somebody's life. And what I've found is usually scratching beneath the surface, there's been a lot more there than just them not returning a phone call. And then other times it just doesn't work out, and that's okay. And so if you come across that, like, don't be discouraged if you're trying to be a mentor or mentee. Push forward. Like it happens. It's happened, I think, probably to everyone on this call. Sometimes you really want to work with someone, it just doesn't work out, and that's okay. And I think it's important to acknowledge that everyone on this panel has probably had some of those failures, and it just helps us grow and we just push through.
Well, I
Can
think
I add something super quickly to that?
yes, Gay.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I have found after, many years of doing this, that often your voice is still in their head, and years later they pop back up. We talked about LinkedIn. I can't tell you how many young women who weren't going the distance or dropped out, like Jeanine is referencing, and you thought, oh, I feel like I failed them, or what went wrong, and they reach out to me on LinkedIn, or they find me on Facebook, and I think, wow, that's kind of cool. Somewhere back there in their head is my voice. And so some of them, not all of them, but some just need time. They aren't ready when we start this, but they're ready down the road.
And I think we've had a number of different ways in which we've talked about how this relationship has and does and can provide resiliency, support resiliency, help people through difficult situations, because a mentorship is a very particular kind of relationship. It's, Jeff said, you're not the money, and you're not the mother, we got that, and you're not the boss. It's a mentor-mentor relationship. It's a journey, and it can be long, it can be short, and as Gay said, it might be interrupted. It might come back. So I want to thank all of our speakers very, very much for sharing so generously and candidly their thoughts and their experiences. That's a benefit and a gift in itself, which we all appreciate. And Debbie, I don't know if you have something that you want to say in closing.
I do. I would like to not only thank our panelists, but thank you, Susan, for moderating this panel. It's been fantastic. I want to thank our participants for being so active in their participation. And I want to just note that, as you can tell from this conversation, mentorship is a core foundation to the student experience at the D'Amore-McKim School of Business and at Northeastern as a whole. And whether it's through the McCarthy's Venture Mentoring Network or Torch or Women in Finance, we have a lot of mentorship opportunities that if you're interested in getting involved, we will definitely be sending different opportunities in the follow-up survey that you'll receive from attending this talk. So please take a look, and we'd love to have your involvement. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.